What's coming up? The World Food Programme raises concern over the lack of aid access to the Democratic Republic of Congo, where thousands of civilians are displaced. All passengers are feared dead after an American airline jet carrying 60 passengers and 4 crew members collided mid-air with a U.S. Army helicopter with 3 soldiers on board late Wednesday. And 3 more Israeli hostages and 5 Thai workers are back in Israel after being freed as part of the ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54. The World Food Programme is expressing concern on Friday over the lack of aid access to the Democratic Republic of Congo, specifically Goma in eastern Congo and surrounding camps for internally displaced people. Analysts are warning of an impending humanitarian crisis in Goma as basic services crumble under rebel control. M23 leader Colonel Nangaa is vowing to remain in Goma and continue the rebels' advance towards Kinshasa. He claims the group is establishing secure humanitarian corridors for displaced people to return home. But he is criticizing Congo's President Felix Tshisekedi's government for over-militarizing the region. The WFP spokesperson in Kinshasa says the situation is dire.
People are really running out of food, clean water, medical supplies, and that's a big concern. So the supply chain has really been strangled at the moment. If you think about land access, air access, when everything is closed down.
International pressure is mounting on Rwanda over its alleged support for the rebels. Rwanda has repeatedly denied that it is backing the M23 rebels. VOA's Roger Muntu recently interviewed the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Democratic Republic of Congo, Therese Kayikwamba-Wagner, regarding the ongoing situation and conflict in eastern Congo. The discussion covered key developments, government responses, and potential solutions to the crisis. Here's an excerpt from that interview.
First of all, I want to confirm that Goma is under foreign occupation by the Rwandan Defense Forces, the official army of Rwanda, our neighbor. Indeed, we have seen after days of intense fighting a presence of the M23 and the RDF that have now gained a large control over a majority of the city of Goma. When it comes to the death toll, because the situation has been so volatile, but also because the M23 and the Rwandan army have an interest not to depict and to allow the world to see the brutality of their attack, it is still very difficult to have a firm estimate of the number of deaths that have resulted in these days of an onslaught.
Does your government, Her Excellency, view this as a failure to defend a major city that is Goma? How do you explain this setback? And so many people ask me, how did this happen?
Mm-hmm. Of course, it is a setback, and it is an infuriating setback. I will not shy away from saying that. We need to acknowledge the fact that, and this has been reported for the past months, if not years, Rwanda has invested massively in arming itself and arming the M23 in eastern Congo. They have invested in weaponry of a sophistication that was unknown until then in the region. Weaponry that has been so performing, if you want, that even the United Nations at a briefing to the Security Council clearly said that they were outgunned. We have to also be cognizant of the fact that Rwanda violated at many occasions the ceasefire that had been negotiated through the Rwanda process.
Just 2 days ago, Rwandan President Paul Kagame reiterated that Rwanda is not backing the M23 rebels. Speaking with leaders of the East African community during a virtual emergency summit, he said the rebels are Congolese and are not Rwandan. We'll have more of Roger Muntu's interview with Congo's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Therese Kayikwamba-Wagner, on Africa 54 Monday. For more perspective on the situation in Eastern Congo, I'm joined live from Nairobi by Declan Galvin, a Managing Director, Exigent Risk Advisory. Galvin, the M23 rebels have taken control of Goma, Bukavu, and vowed to advance towards Kinshasa, the power seat of President Tshisekedi. Should he be alarmed?
So, for sure, Tshisekedi should be alarmed. You've got Rwandan-backed rebels occupying and holding parts of Congolese sovereign territory, and particularly territory which is of tremendous economic value and necessity to the Congolese state. So from a geostrategic and from an economic perspective, Tshisekedi should be concerned. And then also from a domestic political perspective, this makes him look weak. It makes him look like he's unable to kind of maintain both sovereignty and command of Congolese forces, which is problematic for his regime.
Declan, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa is also blaming Rwanda's Defense Force militia for the deaths of 13 South African peacekeepers in DRC. And in his remarks, these are remarks that have really angered President Paul Kagame of Rwanda. And he posted his reaction on X today, and I quote, President Kagame saying, if South Africa prefers confrontation, Rwanda will deal with the matter in that context any day. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I think a couple things. South Africa and the South African president should certainly be frustrated and should certainly be holding Rwanda responsible for the deaths of South African forces who were deployed for the purposes of maintaining peace and security in Congo. So the South African president regime has the total right to be upset and the total right to blame Rwanda for destabilizing this region and layering on more threat to South African forces. If we look at Paul Kagame, Rwandan president's reaction, this is of course the reaction of somebody who is attempting to muddy the waters and misguide observers and analysts by kind of putting South Africa down and criticizing the stance. I'm not at all surprised that's what Rwanda is choosing to do, and ultimately, what needs to happen is there needs to be more African states, more allied Western states, criticizing Rwanda for this, and not just for South Africa. South Africa has had tremendous loss as a consequence of this unlawful activity.
But Declan, Rwanda has repeatedly denied backing M23 rebels. These rebels have been holed up inside DRC for quite some time. Of course, now they have a lot of guts. They have taken over Bukavu, they took over Goma, and now they're saying they're heading towards Kinshasa. Like we said, it's a power seat of the president. Why would, Rwanda has said it has nothing to do with the M23 rebels, that they're on their own, but who is funding them?
So Rwanda is funding this insecurity, and Rwanda and the Rwandan state is the one which is advancing this agenda. There's no question about that. There are facts which are near universally accepted by people, which have less evidence than the evidence against Rwanda and its sponsorship of what's going on in Eastern Congo. So it's really not up for much debate. And if Rwanda would like to debate the accusations against it for sponsoring these groups, it should table evidence and begin to have a conversation, which is really kind of not forthcoming in a robust way. What Rwanda is doing, so to understand what the motivation behind Paul Kagame and Rwanda would be, is if we look at kind of the broad geopolitical problem set, as well as the local regional problem set in the Great Lakes region, there's a tremendous amount of distraction and activity going on globally, which is focusing the attention of the United States, of France, and of other African countries. which allows and provides a window for Rwanda to sponsor M23 to begin to hold major administrative locations within eastern Congo, particularly Goma, and then, almost certainly Bukavu. And so this is something that Rwanda can do without much recourse. And of course, the reason is that there's tremendous mineral and other resource, which is bringing wealth to the Rwanda state, which then allows Rwanda to advance its own agenda. That's ultimately what's happening.
We have to wrap it up here for now. Thank you so much, Declan. We appreciate your insight. Declan Galvin is the Managing Director at Exigent Risk Advisory. All passengers are feared dead after an American airline jet carrying 60 passengers and 4 crew members collided mid-air with a U.S. Army helicopter with 3 soldiers on board late Wednesday. While officials investigate the exact cause, President Donald Trump suggested government diversity hiring programs as a possible reason for the collision near Reagan Washington National Airport. White House Bureau Chief Patsy Widakuswara has the story.
Emergency personnel, including divers, worked through the night in the frigid water of the Potomac River near the Reagan Washington National Airport where the wreckage fell. Surveillance video shows the moment of collision between an American Airlines flight from Wichita, Kansas to Washington and a U.S. military helicopter that happened about 9 p.m. Wednesday. 60 passengers and 4 crew members were on the plane, 3 soldiers aboard the helicopter. President Donald Trump offered condolences and speculated on the cause of the crash in remarks to White House reporters Thursday.
We do not know what led to this crash, but we have some very strong opinions and ideas.
Trump blamed diversity policies in the Federal Aviation Administration under his predecessors Barack Obama and Joe Biden.
A group within the FAA, another story, determined that the workforce was too white, that they had concerted efforts to get the administration to change that and to change it immediately.
He said the collision should have been prevented. Shortly before the crash, an air traffic controller asked the helicopter if it could see the plane. Officials say dozens of bodies have been pulled from the icy water. The crash is the first major crisis for Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy, who was just sworn in Wednesday.
We are going to take responsibility at the Department of Transportation and the FAA to make sure we have the reforms that have been dictated by President Trump.
And for Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, who said the soldiers were on a training flight and wearing night vision goggles when the crash happened.
The military does dangerous things. It does routine things on the regular basis. Tragically, last night, a mistake was made.
American Airlines CEO Robert Isom vowed to assist in the investigation.
We are actively working with local, state, and federal authorities on emergency response efforts, and the American Airlines care team has been activated to assist our passengers and their families.
U.S. figure skating athletes, coaches, and family members were among the passengers, as were Russian world champion couple Yevgenia Shishkova and Vadim Naumov.
We offer our condolences to loved ones who lost our fellow citizens who died in this air crash. There are yet no plans on contact at the highest level.
The crash is the deadliest air disaster in the United States since November of 2001. Patsy Widakuswara, VOA News at the White House.
3 more Israeli hostages and 5 Thai workers are back in Israel after being freed as part of the ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas. Linda Gradstein in Jerusalem reports there were emotional reunions, but their liberation did not go smoothly.
The day began with the release of Agam Berger, the last freed of the 5 female Israeli soldiers who were kidnapped from their base near Gaza during the October 7, 2023 Hamas terror attack. Friday's ceremony was held against the backdrop of the ruined northern Gaza neighborhood of Jabalia. After 482 days of captivity, Berger had an emotional reunion with her family and was then transferred to the hospital. Doctors say her medical condition is good.
We're here, and I promise you we will never leave you again. A mother's promise.
U.S. President Donald Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff also came to the hospital to meet the freed hostages and then visited Tel Aviv's Hostage Square, the center of demonstrations for the release of the hostages for the last 15 months. Israelis were riveted by the scenes of this third hostage release, part of the first stage of a ceasefire deal with Hamas that will see 33 hostages, women, older men, and those who are ill, released in exchange for hundreds of Palestinian prisoners.
In the last 15 months, we got to know these people and to see them as our own family, because in the Israeli society, the solidarity and the feeling that we are all united as one people is very, very important. And the release of the hostages is something that is very dear to us and touches our core values of the Israeli society.
After Berger's release by Hamas, 2 other Israeli and 5 Thai hostages were freed by Islamic Jihad. The Israelis, 80-year-old Gadi Moses and 29-year-old Arbel Yehud, are civilians taken from their homes in kibbutz Nir Oz. 1/4 of the 400 Israeli residents of Nir Oz was killed or taken hostage. The scene was chaotic as thousands of Palestinians surrounded the cars transferring the hostages, jeering and pushing. Armed Hamas gunmen struggled to control the crowd. In response, Israel temporarily delayed the planned release of more than 100 Palestinian prisoners, including some serving life sentences.
Today, there is a terrorist being released who is by his own hands murdered 45 Israelis in various terror attacks. The price is horrible.
As the first stage of the hostage release proceeds, Israel and Hamas are set to begin negotiations for the second stage. This entails the handover of the rest of the Israeli hostages, alive and dead, as well as hundreds of Palestinian prisoners, and an Israeli withdrawal from most of Gaza. Linda Gradstein, VOA News, Jerusalem.
U.S. President Donald Trump has signed an executive order suspending the U.S. refugee admissions program. The order states that the record levels of migration are overwhelming various states, making this halt necessary. VOA's Paul Dijo spoke with Pamela Asombo Anchang, publisher and executive editor of the Immigrant magazine based in Los Angeles, California, about the implications for refugees.
It's realigned the U.S. refugee admissions program. It's been suspended, basically, which means that everyone that was in the pipeline is no longer literally in the pipeline. It's as simple as that. And it's very sad. And most of these people are fleeing violence, they're fleeing war, they're fleeing persecution. And so this ban is impacting all the different stages of resettlement. And everybody basically is being affected by this order. And from what I understand, though, they say it does not apply to special immigrant visa applications, but it will still delay, like you said, the resettlement of those 200,000 people that are in the pipeline. That's going to create a backlog, number one. Okay, it's going to create a backlog. In the meantime, where do you go? Where do you go? And what is sad about it is because being a refugee isn't it a United Nations obligation? So what we have just simply said, we don't really care about that, about refugee protection. We don't care about people that are refugees that are fleeing all this kind of turmoil. I don't know. In terms of the standard, I think at this point, we need the global community, not just Americans, to speak up on that, because it's not just about us anymore. Because refugees come from all different parts of the world, and it's an obligation, United Nations Charter, to receive refugees.
As part of my job, I've crisscrossed some of these refugee camps across Africa. I've been to Eastern Congo. In Uganda, you talk to all these refugees, they all have high hopes. They look up to America. They pray that one day the UNHCR person is going to come to them and say, you've been admitted or you've been granted permission to relocate to the United States. A program like this that bans those resettlement programs, how much of an impact is it going to have on some of those people that, that have been waiting for 20 years, 30 years just to relocate here?
Number one, it violates the humanitarian commitment of America, right? And which means that these people are going to be living in all those, most of them are living in those refugee camps, waiting for their turn. It's the mental toll, the economic toll, the health. It is devastating. It's a breach of trust that I don't know how America then looks like a leader in the world if this is how you treat people to whom you've given commitment. I think that even those nations that are housing or hosting those resettlement people who are waiting to be resettled, I think those governments ought to speak up.
NGOs that host these refugees, that sponsor these refugees, are going to be targeted. So what does this mean for the whole immigration or refugee program in the United States?
All these challenges are going to go all the way to the Supreme Court. So is the Supreme Court going to uphold? Is it going to abide by the Constitution? For example, trying to change birthright citizenship, which is enshrined in the Constitution. Is the Supreme Court going to uphold that? Or is it going to say, no, we do not. We're not going to change this because this is the foundation of America. That once you're on American soil, you're born on American soil, you're an American citizen.
That was Pamela Asobo-Anchang, publisher and executive editor of the Immigrant magazine based in Los Angeles. She spoke with VOA's Paul Ndiho. Uganda has confirmed an outbreak of the Ebola virus in Kampala, with the first confirmed patient dying on Wednesday from the disease that causes severe bleeding and organ failure. The health ministry says it is the East African country's 9th outbreak since it recorded its first infection of the viral disease in 2000. The patient is a male nurse at the Mulago National Referral Hospital and had initially sought treatment at various facilities, including Mulago, as well as with other traditional healer after developing fever-like symptoms. 44 contacts of the deceased man have been listed for tracing, including 30 health workers, according to the health ministry. Still to come, we'll tell you about African films nominated for an Academy Award. Stay with us.
Lupus is a mysterious autoimmune disease that primarily affects women of childbearing age between 15 and 44 years. It occurs when the body's immune system produces antibodies that attack its own healthy tissues and organs. On the next edition of Our Voices, we will focus on this chronic autoimmune disease, its symptoms, its causes, and its treatment. Join the conversation each week right here on Our Voices.
You're watching VOA's Red Carpet. My name is Jackson Vunganyi. Thank you so much for joining us each week. Right here on Red Carpet, we bring you the latest in
In other news, as tensions flared between Somalia and Ethiopia last year, social media became a breeding ground for misinformation. One video falsely claiming to show Egyptian troops training in Somalia gained 34,000 views on the social media platform X. But Ethiopian fact-checkers were able to prove the footage was old and unrelated to the current tensions. The case, however, was not an isolated incident. And the French military has handed over its last military base in Chad to local authorities in the capital, N'Djamena. The move on Thursday came 2 months after the former French colony in Central Africa severed its defense cooperation agreement with Paris. Chad has been a key counter-terrorism force in the region and was one of the last countries in which France maintained a large military presence. The 97th Academy Awards, also known as the Oscars, are scheduled for March 2nd, and African creatives are among hundreds from different parts of the world who are anxious to see if they will win one of the prestigious golden statuettes. VOA's Mike Hovey has the details.
Now this year's nominees for Best Live Action Short Film. Alien.
African cinema is being recognized at this year's Academy Awards. Included in the nominees is South Africa's The Last Ranger, which has been nominated in the Best Live Action Film category. The South African film explores the dangers of rhino poaching while highlighting conservation efforts in the nation's Eastern Cape province. Cindy Lee, the director of The Last Ranger, says she's happy that the movie is receiving international attention because it helps expose the threat that rhino poaching has on several South African industries, especially tourism.
We have this huge problem in South Africa, rhino poaching. One rhino is killed every 15 hours in South Africa, and we've already lost over 10,000 rangers, who put their life on the line to try and protect the rhinos. So my brother wrote this beautiful short film. This is based very loosely. It's inspired by a true story. It talks to a lot of things, It talks to so many socioeconomic issues as well facing South Africa.
Studies released by the World Wildlife Fund showed that the population of black rhinos declined dramatically to fewer than 2,500 worldwide between 1960 and 1995. The international group says persistent conservation efforts across Africa have helped increase the black rhino population to more than 6,000. However, the WWF warns that the wildlife crimes, especially rhino poaching, to sell the horns illegally on the international market continues to plague the species and threaten recovery efforts.
Rhinos are about to become extinct. I think the black rhino is like right on the cusp of extinction. So that is the emergency situation we have right now, because if we don't stop this, we won't have rhinos. And if there are no rhinos, that could affect tourism. And if tourism collapses, South Africa could collapse. I mean, you have to understand the importance. South Africa's biggest source of income is its tourism.
African cinematographers are excited about the international success of The Last Ranger. They say the film's a paving way for the world to learn more about Africa and the talent that the continent offers. Lee echoes those sentiments.
The Thunder Choir is a beautiful choir out of Khayelitsha, and they are the vocalists in our film. Now imagine it's a Thunder Choir, nobody knows who they are. Then this film gets onto a platform like the Oscars, and when people, all these Academy voters are going to go, there are 10,000, I think, Academy voters, they're going to go and watch this film. 10,000 people are going to see the actors, producers, writers, directors. 10,000 potential people who are into music hear the Thunder Choir, and they reach out to the Thunder Choir and offer them work, and their lives change, and more people want that to happen, and then the ball starts rolling. So it is, we can change lives one film at a time.
In the 95-year-old history of the Academy Awards, only 3 African movies have won an Oscar in the Best International Films category. The first was Z, an Algerian movie produced in 1969. The second was Black and White in Color, a movie from Ivory Coast produced in 1976. And the last time an African movie won the Golden Statuette was in 2005, after the South African movie Tsotsi received the accolade. Mike Ove, VOA News, Washington.
And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, have a great weekend.